Welcome to the Upland Nation podcast, an insider edition. This time we're going inside the Beltway to find out what the heck happened in 2025 on the regulatory and governmental front. Maybe we'll get some explanations about that grab of public land. And we'll also take a long downrange look at the same subjects and what we can do as mere mortals to affect our government's actions in the worlds we live in. Public access, regulatory figures, and everything else that affects we upland hunters. Joining me for this will be Jeff Crane and Taylor Schmitz. These are the two top guys in the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation. They'll be giving us the inside look at everything that goes on in the halls of the Capitol, the White House, and all of those nameless, faceless bureaucracies that affect our activities. Yeah, it's going to be a fun time. It's going to be a little bit deep into the weeds, but if you are concerned about the future of hunting and public access to public land, you'll learn something and take advantage of it, I am confident. As usual, the entire project is brought to you by these sponsors: Heartland Lodge, Cable Gang's Tie-Out Systems, Mid-Valley Clays and Shooting School, TruLock Choke Tubes, Purina Pro Plan Sport Dog Food, Sage and Breaker Gun Care Products, and Pointer Shotguns. Well, the last time we talked on the record, I was doing a radio show for Field and Stream magazine. That's Jeff Crane. He's the president and CEO of the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation. And next to him is Taylor Schmitz. He is the senior vice president. We're going to talk policy, but we're also going to talk about policy when it comes to the things that are important to you and me. Welcome to both of you to the Upland Nation podcast, special insider edition. Jeff, why don't you kick us off here? Tell us a little bit about the organization, and then we'll go a little deeper into the important stuff like hunting season.
Perfect, Scott. Thank you for having me back. It's nice to be with you. The Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation has been around for 36 years. Started in Washington to work with the largest bipartisan caucus in Congress, but over the last 20-some years, importantly, we've expanded it across the country to include all 50 states. And then now the last segment of that stool, if you will, is a bipartisan governor's caucus that has 29 governors. So it puts us in a unique position of having direct access to the policymakers on a bipartisan level from federal government all the way through the states. And our sole focus is on conservation, hunting, fishing, and the great outdoors.
And just so that everybody understands what a caucus really is and how it functions, Taylor, can you give us kind of a nitty-gritty insight into what caucuses are and what they do?
Sure. Thank you, Scott. A caucus is nothing more than just a fancy word for a group of like-minded individuals that work together really with the shared values, shared ideas, and working collectively to advance some sort of greater good. And in the case for us here at CSF, that greater good is sportsmen and women policy. And for us at CSF, most of your listeners probably won't know who we are, right? And that's because we're very different than most other organizations in our space in that we don't move any on the ground dirt. We don't do any on the ground projects. We solely do policy. But the reality of it is, whether you care about policy or politics or you hate it, policy and politics dictates everything that we do every single day as sportsmen and women. And without the right words on paper, i.e. policy, we can't do the things that we all love on this call. And that's why we're here at CSF, to work with those caucuses and work with those like-minded individuals at the federal and state levels.
You know, unlike a lot of other caucuses, which have very narrow special interests, Jeff, tell us a little bit about the makeup at the congressional level. Who are these people, and what do they represent in the way of geography or even politics? Because we've got both sides of the aisle represented, right?
Yes, we do. And coming back to the Congress, it's the largest bipartisan caucus in the United States Congress, which I think says there's 400 or 500 caucuses, to your point, and I think it says volumes about how important these elected officials feel that the sportsman's community is, whether that maybe is self-serving for votes. I don't really care. As long as they're paying attention to what we think is important and we have that access. But yeah, it's remarkable in how diverse. And the one certainty in politics is the political pendulum swings. It might be Republicans in power in Washington now. Guaranteed at some point in the future, the Republicans will be in the minority. So trying to decouple the policy from the politics is really what we try to use these caucuses for, to say conservation, hunting, and fishing are not defined by partisan labels. They are about heritage, tradition, the conservation values, our wild and natural places, and that transcends any political label.
It's funny, and I think the axiom came from politics. Politics makes for strange bedfellows,
right?
And you might have the biggest bed and the strangest bedfellows, but that doesn't mean everybody is aligned on every issue, does it, Taylor?
No, it doesn't. And that's the thing. Whether you're a hunter, whether you're a fisherman, your priorities don't always align. But what does align is that shared commitment to the outdoors. And one of the things that brings people together within the caucus, and recognizing that you have very liberal Democrats and very staunch conservative Republicans, it's that commitment to the outdoors that brings us all together. And there are places where folks have differences of opinion on things and different approaches to different policies. But at the end of the day, we all want the same thing, and that's to provide good access, good habitat, and ensure that the next generation has opportunities to enjoy the things that we love.
Speaking of things that we love, Jeff, how was your hunting season?
It's been great. Every hunting season's great, Scott. As the older we get, the more you realize how special they get. And so it's been fantastic. I'm sad to say for your listeners, I haven't spent a lot of time on upland this year, but big game, and now it's the heart of our waterfowl season back here in the east, and so the duck and goose hunting is a primary focus right now. But every fall is special, and this one was no exception.
How about you, Taylor? What are your vices?
Unfortunately, much to the chagrin of my wife, I have a lot of vices. I spent a lot of time in the deer stand in November, and unfortunately, it was a pretty tough deer season for me, but I did get out hunting ducks in the Midwest with some good friends over the holidays and had a really great few days out there. And as my hunting season's winding down, or my fall and winter hunting season's winding down, I'm really looking forward to turkey season and getting out and chasing some gobblers here in the spring.
Well, we could talk about all that all day, but we probably ought to talk about the stuff that prompted my request to talk to both of you, and that is, at one point in 2025, there was the big scare, and for a while there, people were fearing that public land may be positioned in a place where it could ultimately be sold off. And I know we could parse out the particulars of that issue that Senator Lee proposed as an amendment. But beyond that, what are the other things that affected us legislatively, policy standpoint issues from 2025 that we might not have known about, and thanks to people like you, were probably managed pretty well? Jeff, you want to start us off?
And I am going to defer to Taylor here very quickly, because he is our policy lead on things here in the office. But I don't want to just gloss over that real threat of the disposal of federal public lands. CSF played a pivotal role in making sure that did not come to pass, and that put us in an awkward position to have to take on the committee chair in the U.S. Senate that's the chair of one of our committees that we have to bring a lot of our policies through. So we had to do that as delicately as we could. We had to do that, in a way that we were not saying no lands, never ever, but that there is a process in place and we need to follow the process. And sure, there are some in holdings and things that the federal government has no business probably holding on to, and if we can leverage those into an exchange for higher value lands for sportsmen and women, that's the way to do it. But this just kind of blanket millions of acres was just a non-starter, and it was a big win for the sportsman's community, and again, we were dead center on the middle of that. But Taylor can probably pick up and talk about a few of the other things, because 25 was an interesting year.
Yeah, and I'll just add one quick.
Go, yeah.
I'll just add one quick thing to that, Scott. And I think part of the challenge with the public land stuff, and to Jeff's point, this was a very real threat. And we really pride ourselves here at CSF of being able to stop any bad proposal at the federal level. But this was something that we were taking extremely serious. And Jeff and I spent virtually every single weekend working on this thing up until it was finally dead. But one of the real concerns with this proposal was that we had no idea what lands we were actually talking about. And we don't know if we were talking about, 2 acres that provides water access for you as an angler, or if we're talking 200,000 acres of your favorite bird hunting spot, right? So that was part of the challenge here. But fortunately, we were able to defeat that. One of the other big things that was going on simultaneously with this was an effort to allow landowners to buy out of Fish and Wildlife Service held conservation easements. And this is a problem because the vast majority of these easements were paid for by duck hunters through the purchase of their federal duck stamp. And this money went directly on the ground to landowners to conserve this habitat, in many cases in perpetuity. And in many cases, these lands were acquired, or these easements were acquired in the 50s, 60s, 70s, etc. And if we lose these lands, if we lose these easements, they would be lost forever. Unfortunately, we were able to work to ensure that language was not included in any proposal. But these are real threats that we're having to deal with every single day here in DC.
Yeah, and a lot of those, having been on the fringes of that in California when I was there, they just fly under the radar until it's too late in many cases. You guys have to be on top of that stuff, and I want to get to that in a minute too. But Taylor, you're in there and you're knocking on the doors. You're sitting across the desk from the big players, and then their staffers, and then all the folks who are affecting this. What is the biggest challenge when you're going into what could be a very antagonistic situation, a personal meeting with a senator or a congressperson? How do you handle that from a psychological basis?
For us at CSF, Scott, we really pride ourselves in not playing any political games. We don't do any endorsing of candidates here. We don't score votes or anything like that. Our sole focus is to work on behalf of sportsmen and women. And because of that, we know that we're in the right spot and we're fighting the right fight every single day. And in many cases, when you're talking to members of Congress or their staff, they have thousands of issues going on and coming across their desk. And members of Congress are extremely busy and dealing with pressing issues. And in many cases, they just simply don't have all the information at their hand. But that's why we're here at CSF, and that's why we're headquartered roughly 2 blocks from the Capitol building, so we can be here for them. And we're not headquartered in DC because it's better hunting or fishing out here. We're headquartered in here because this is where the fight happens. And so because of that, it's our job to make sure that members of Congress and staff and other decision makers are actually getting the right information.
You want to cite some of the other big victories that you guys were involved in on our behalf in 2025, and then we'll look ahead. But let's celebrate last year.
Sure. Quickly, so we touched on a couple at the federal level, but I don't want to lose sight of our work at the state level. And And a couple of those victories were Sunday hunting expansions in both Connecticut and Pennsylvania, and two states that previously did not have Sunday hunting opportunities. And as a result of these two victories in both those states, there's a net increase of 30 million acres that are available for hunting on Sundays across both of those states. And those are real meaningful wins. I remember when I first started hunting, I was fortunate enough to be introduced to it by a friend, and he took me on a Saturday and I said, okay, that was great. Let's go tomorrow. And he laughed at me. At this point in time, Maryland did not have Sunday hunting. He laughed at me and said, you can't hunt on Sundays. And fortunately, CSF was able to work to repeal many of the Sunday hunting prohibitions in Maryland. But there are other states out there that still exist and still have these challenges. But fortunately, Pennsylvania and Connecticut are no longer on that list, and you can hunt on Sundays out there. Another big victory across a couple different states is advancing hunter education programs in schools and providing those opportunities to young students to have hunter education at their disposal, just like any other elective, whether it's art class, whether it's gym class, what have you. But here's an opportunity to get those young students out in the field and learning hunter education at an early age and capturing them before the video screen captures them.
I'm laughing because I think you said whether it's in an art class or a PE class. I'm thinking I'm married to an art teacher. I don't know that she would want you to take her time away from those kids, but I get it, and more power to you.
My wife's a public school teacher, so I wasn't about to say social studies, which she teaches.
Jeff, give us the 30,000-foot view of what's on the menu for 2026, the things that we should maybe at least read the headlines on or stay in touch with, depending on where our passion lies. What are the things you guys have probably gone on a retreat and you've done all of that and you came back with a bullet-pointed list of some sort, or maybe I'm ahead of the curve. You tell me.
No. You're exactly right. There's a whole lot of information, Scott, if I can make the plug on our website, which is www.congressionalsportsman.org, or just Google Congressional Sportsman. You can click on we've got an interactive map, and you can click on your home state or any state you hunt or fish in, and you can find specifics on it. As you can imagine, 50 state legislatures, the U.S. Congress, we on average track 5,000 plus bills at any given time. So it is a very intensive program, but we do have our priorities out there, and continuing to expand the access and opportunity in just broad buckets remains a very key priority. I think there are going to be challenges with on the federal level with the Farm Bill, but clearly that is the largest private lands incentive programs through those various Farm Bill programs, and I don't think they're going away, but we're missing maybe our opportunity if we don't get a new Farm Bill to tweak and make some of these programs more attractive and better. The highway bill is slated to be reauthorized, and you think, what does a highway bill have to do with sportsmen's issues? Well, all those roads on the federal public lands, the access points, boat ramps, all this kind of stuff falls under the highway bill, and out west it includes the corridors that allow big game to safely cross highways and things like that. So we're actively involved in that. And then I'll flag one at the state level that is a major concern and is about to rear its ugly head, is that there is again a petition in Oregon for a ballot initiative that would ban all hunting and fishing in the state of Oregon, and they are getting very close to the signature threshold. So we are treating this right now as a very real and likely ballot initiative that the voters in Oregon are going to have to consider in the November election cycle. And obviously that would be catastrophic for not just Oregon, but for the precedent it would set for the future of this country. And so we are part of the coalition there that includes farm groups, and that we have to take extremely seriously. And I think it's also part of the anti's effort. And I'll give us a pat on the back because of these caucuses in Washington and in the state capitals. They have failed to move their agenda in the federal level. They are failing to move their agenda at the states through the legislative process. So they're going to the emotional heartstrings of trying to go straight to the, candidly, a lot of times an uninformed voter to try to make this appeal and do ballot box biology, which is the worst way to manage our wildlife resources. So that one is very real, and if you live in Oregon, we're going to need your help.
Well, I jumped in on the last one when they banned hound hunting for bears and cougars.
Right.
And that was their first attempt at what you just described as ballot box biology. They knew they couldn't win anywhere except at the initiative level. And sure enough, they did. And it was based on exactly what you said, emotion and no science. What can we do, Taylor, at this point in time, if we're Oregonians or if we are identifying some other problem in another state? What are the best ways for us to stay on top of these things so that we can take action, however it fits for us, on that statewide level?
The first immediate thing is staying engaged. And the best way to stay engaged, Jeff mentioned our website, taking a look at our website, taking a look at our social media, and we're very good about putting out timely updates on when everything is moving and when we need folks to really get engaged. But also talking to your friends, talking to your neighbors about what is happening here and what the truth is of the matter. And you look at the Colorado example a couple years ago with the effort to ban mountain lion and bobcat hunting. That won because people were talking to each other, and they were scared about walking down the trail and taking their dog on a walk and being attacked by a mountain lion, just as we saw the other week in Colorado. But it was people really getting out and sharing information and sharing the truth about what this effort is. So we, as informed sportsmen and women, it's our responsibility to talk to those people that may or may not be as close to this as we are and don't know the on the ground reality. So it's incumbent upon us to talk to our friends and family and neighbors about this.
Well,
if I can interrupt, Scott,
sure,
and then the other element of that is show up and vote. Use your constitutional right as an American and show up and vote, because your vote does matter. We've seen that in all kinds of elections, even over the last decade. Your vote matters, and being informed, and as Taylor says, talk to your non-hunting friends and help them to understand that hunting is part of conservation. We have the greatest success story in this country on conservation and bringing back game and non-game species, thanks to the uniquely American system of conservation funding, which is that the hunters and anglers put their money where their mouth is, and we pay for this, and it is working, and there's nothing broken in Oregon, and this emotional tug is nonsense, but show up and vote. There's absentee votes, there's early voting, there's no excuse that you don't have your ballot counted and cast on this if you live in Oregon.
Absolutely. And you talk about the level of knowledge that the average voter has. It's almost chilling sometimes. Like I said, I was involved pretty deeply for a few weeks as a consultant on the bear and cougar initiatives here in Oregon, back before another organization at the national level, not yours, took over that whole campaign. But I was the spokesperson, and I was getting ready to be on the biggest Sunday afternoon talk show in the state. And I was going to be across the table from a couple PETA folks and then a tribal member and something else. And the producer said, all right, so blah, blah, we're going to talk about this, talk about that. And I said something like, yeah, and I'm going to talk about cougar this, cougar that. And he said, no. We're going to talk about mountain lions, no cougars.
Yeah, right.
That is the level of knowledge that the average voter, this was a producer, and they didn't know the difference.
Right.
So anyway, it happens, and it will continue to happen, and it's our job to create there's as you both know, and I don't want to give you a lecture, but the elections move 10% one way or the other. That's all we need to do is move that 10% that are on the fence. So everybody can do that with a neighbor, a friend, a relative, or anything else. Everybody in your family would be a good start.
Yes.
Anyway, enough proselytizing on my part. By the way, this is the Upland Nation podcast, Insider Edition. We are literally inside the Beltway with Taylor Schmitz and Jeff Crane of the Congressional Sportsmen Foundation. Guys, before the break, your organization differs from the ducks and the turkeys and the elks and the quails and the pheasants groups because of what? Jeff, do you want to give me a quick description of who your membership really is?
So our big difference is because our mission is so narrowly focused. It's only on policy. As Taylor said earlier, we don't move dirt. We don't do R3 on the ground. We work in the political arena. That's one. Two, we work both federally and at the state level. And three, it's the scope of issues. We may be working on a trapping issue over here, and then we're working on a marine fisheries issue over there, and then we're working on big game migration corridors all simultaneously. So it's not limited to just ducks, to just wetlands, to just, big game. So it's the scope of the issues. And it's our unique ability to work inside and ability and focus to work in the policy arena. That's all we do.
I'm not going to, I mean this in the best of ways because I used to have to register as one myself. But Taylor, you're really a lobbyist, aren't you?
We are advocates, and we are the voices for sportsmen and women. And that's our job, is to just provide good, sound information to elected officials.
And I mean that in the best of ways because we sometimes look askance at that term, but there are people in that area that are working on our behalf instead of against our best interests. And you guys are those guys to a great degree. You must work with a lot of our other allies as well. So there are times, not whatever the opposite of strange bedfellows is, sometimes you're climbing in under the covers with the elk people or with the salmon people or something like that. Is most of your work, does it cross over? Is it cooperative in that way?
Yeah, I'll take it. Yes. I mean, a bigger tent is a better tent. The one thing that CSF doesn't have is we're not a membership-based organization, and so we need the elks, the turkeys, the upland groups to help amplify the message. We were talking about Oregon. We need every group out there that has members in Oregon to educate and tell them, you got to spread the word and you got to show up. And so we are constantly working, and I think it creates better synergy and we're more effective. And they rely on us because of our relationships and our deep knowledge of how the political process works and how the access that we have to be able to get in. So it is a bigger tent, and we work constantly with other groups. Nobody gets Scott, no one person or one group gets anything done. It's a collective effort.
Of course, they all want to take sole credit, but that's a different story.
Yeah.
Taylor, you want to add anything to that before the break?
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would add is CSF is very knowledgeable and we're experts on many things, but we don't know every single issue about, every single duck issue or every single elk issue. And it's really important for us to have those partners that we can call and say, hey, can you help us talk through this a little bit more? And we might not, one of the things that we pride ourselves here at CSF is we might not know the answer, but we certainly know who does, right? And to be able to be that conduit for elected officials and staff to get in touch with the right person, and having those partners across the board, whether it's freshwater, saltwater, big game, small game, upland, etc. We are all in this thing together, and we need to be all in this together, or the other side's unfortunately going to win.
A good place to take a quick break. We have a couple commercial announcements. We'll be back. I want to talk more about the Farm Bill because we look at that and our eyes glaze over, but there are some specifics that are critical in there, and then more of how we can be involved. So we'll be back, everybody, with Jeff Crane and Taylor Schmitz of the Congressional Sportsmen Foundation. I'm Scott Linden. This is the Upland Nation Podcast, Insider Edition. We'll be back in just a moment. And the Insider Editions of the Upland Nation Podcast are made possible by cablegangs.com. Not just tie-outs, although that's what made me a fan of these guys. Brennan and the crew will make all sorts of other things for you on a custom basis, or take a look at their long list of products available at cablegangs.com, including a number of systems for roading your dog. If you're one of those, distance runner types, they've got something for you. A lot of the designs are specifically reducing shock to your dog from pulling on essentially stationary heavy object. If that's your jam, they've got something for you. And of course, all their tie-out stakes and all the tie-out systems are superior in materials, engineering, and manufacturing. Let me give you one example. Used it again just a couple days ago. The brass snaps on their tie-out stakes are superior in many ways. They're the largest on the market. They will not corrode, and they will last longer because they're brass, not steel. Learn more about the entire product line at cablegangs.com. And thanks again. Let me give a shout out to all our other sponsors who make this entire Insider Edition possible. Mid-Valley Clays and Shooting School, Trulock Choke Tubes, Purina Pro Plan Sport Dog Food, Sage and Breaker Gun Care Products, and Pointer Shotguns. Welcome back to the Upland Nation Podcast, a special Insider Edition with my friends in Washington and your friends too. Jeff Crane, the CEO and the president of the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation, and Taylor Schmitz, he's the senior VP handling a lot of the policy issues. You know, we hear a lot about the Farm Bill, and it's massive, but it's also obsolete. Hasn't Congress simply renewed an old model of that for the last few years, Taylor?
Yeah, that's correct, Scott. So the last time that Congress passed or reauthorized the Farm Bill was 2018. It expired in September 2023, and we've been operating under what's known as an extension. So essentially working off of antiquated policy for the last couple of years now.
What does that mean to us, and what are the risks of functioning with a poorly used car instead of a new one?
What it means to us is that the conditions that our farmers and our private landowners are facing today are not the same conditions that they were facing when Congress passed the 2018 Farm Bill. And there have been a number of things that have happened across the world, whether it's Ukraine and Russia or what have you, that we couldn't have predicted in 2018. And because of that, market conditions are different now than they were then. Our private landowners and farmers, ranchers, producers are facing different challenges, and there's different circumstances that they have to deal with every single day just to keep their farms in operation and to keep food on the table, frankly. So what it means is that we're lacking the ability to fully leverage our private landowners, leverage our farmers, leverage our ranchers in a way that works for them for conservation, but also to meet their bottom line as private landowners.
I have a good friend who's a rancher, runs 120,000 acres and a lot of cows, and his life has been a roller coaster since the whole Ukraine thing got started, and not just because of the grain and all that, but the price of beef has been up and down and everywhere in between. So it really does affect those guys directly. What about how the Farm Bill is relevant to upland bird hunters? where is the nexus in there? Jeff, you want to address that on the broad basis?
I'm gonna defer to the man that knows the answer. I'm sorry to play ignorant, but that's why Taylor's on this call. To be honest with you,
Well,
I know when I'm out of my depth here.
I get it, Taylor. Where's the connection between the Farm Bill and upland bird hunters?
So I think most people would be surprised to learn that the Farm Bill is the largest source of conservation funding in the United States and arguably the world, at over $30 billion every 5 years for on-the-ground conservation. And why that is the case is because the vast majority of land in the United States is privately held, which means that the vast majority of conservation for fish and wildlife is occurring on private lands. And there's only so much public lands out there. There's only so much land that's not held in the private estate. So therefore, we need to focus this energy on the vast majority of land in the United States. So there's a number of conservation programs within the Farm Bill, and specifically to upland bird hunters. One of those is the Conservation Reserve Program. And essentially the idea of this is to farm the best and conserve the rest, right? So you have marginal lands. It could be a buffer strip around a wetland or an area or a piece of land that traditionally floods every other year. Let's take that land out of production and set it aside for conservation, whether it's for nesting or whether it's for you to be able to, walk through with your dog and kick a big rooster up. Let's take this land and set it aside. So farmers they're not putting all those inputs into this land, and we're also giving them money in recognition of them taking this land out of production. We're giving them money to set this aside specifically for conservation. So the Conservation Reserve Program really is the bread and butter Farm Bill conservation program for upland bird hunters.
I'd just add one more, and now I'm contradicting myself. I seem to do the older I get. But the various voluntary walk-in and voluntary access programs, those are subsidized through the Farm Bill in funding on that. So I imagine a lot of your listeners, Scott, probably take advantage of these programs, especially in the western states where the private landowners do allow the public to get on there. Well, they get paid for that both through the state but also through federal funding. That is also included in the Farm Bill, and so being able to enhance that, to work to make that more robust are the kinds of things that we would like to look at on the policy side of things with a reauthorization of the Farm Bill.
You just prompted another thought. Thanks, Jeff. No wonder we pay you the big bucks.
Yeah, right.
but along those same lines, another major conservation funding force, if you want to call it that, is very low profile in many ways because we never see the excise taxes on bows and arrows and ammo and rifles and shotguns and fishing rods and boat fuel. Those two legislative efforts that came about in the 30s, the Dingell-Johnson Act on the fishing side and the Pittman-Robertson Act on the hunting side, those funds are also doled out by the feds. And do you have can you have some influence on how all that happens?
So first of all, those two bills that you mentioned are probably the most uniquely American and the most successful ways to fund conservation that the world has ever known, and we guard those. There are periodic runs where some genius thinks that there's got to be a better way to allocate that money, and there are some crazy ideas that come out. So we jealously guard those. But yeah, most of the budgets of the state wildlife agencies across this country are paid for through these excise taxes that ultimately we as sportsmen and women pay for the enjoyment of our outdoor recreation. So it is a direct user pay but public benefits system, and those funds thankfully have been growing, and again, we have to very carefully guard against the attempts to raid those kind of funds, to redirect those kind of funds, because without that, this system collapses. And it has worked for the last close to 100 years, to your point, from the Pittman Robertson in the 30s and Dingle Johnson in the 50s, and we protect it. Recently, we've been trying to add to it with the direct mail purchases, primarily of fishing gear from especially overseas sources that are bypassing the Dingle Johnson excise tax. And so we've been working with Congress to close what we consider a loophole, add more money back into the Dingle Johnson side of the sport fish programs through Fish and Wildlife Service, and those are the kind of nitty gritty stuff that people don't really pay attention to, that Taylor talks about, that it's kind of behind the scenes. You want to eat the sausage, you don't necessarily want to know how it's made. Well, we're the sausage makers,
Absolutely true. And if I might interject, editorial stance here, a lot of people don't realize that, at least in the Pittman-Robertson Act case, and I bet same on the fishing side, sportsmen and women came to Congress and said, tax us.
Yes.
Same like the duck stamp.
Yes.
We asked to be taxed so that we could do conservation for everybody. And I just want to point out, because I was on a wildlife refuge not 4 days ago, and all those mountain bikers and all those hikers who are walking around on there are the beneficiaries of duck stamp spending that they didn't do. Okay, off the soapbox. Taylor, let's look into the crystal ball just a little bit, and particularly the public access side. I do this. This is the 15th year I've surveyed my followers, and I started asking questions about the most important issues they think we as upland bird hunters face. And since I've started asking that question, number one every year, as I used to say in the music world, number one with a bullet, is access to public land and more public land to access. What do you see coming down the pike in 2026 and beyond that might affect that one way or the other?
The one thing that we're working really hard right now on, Scott, is passing legislation through Congress is great, right? But I don't even want to say that's half the battle, but it is half the battle. And the other half of that battle is getting the federal agencies to implement legislation. So all of our hard work could get lost if a bill is not implemented in the correct manner. So I say that to lead us up to one of the things we're working very hard right now on implementing is the MAPLAND Act, Modernizing Public Access to Our Public Land Act. It's one of the best acronyms that we've ever worked on here in DC, but essentially what that bill will do is it requires all of our federal land management agencies to digitize and modernize all of their public land mapping information. So there's no more driving down the road and wondering, is that easement publicly, or that right of way, is that publicly available and accessible, or is that privately held? Theoretically, once we implement this, you'll have all that information on your handheld device to make it easier for you while you're out in the field. So that's a big one to modernize access. Another one that we're working on is implementing is the Explore Act. And there's a number of provisions in this. One of the ones that we're particularly excited about is a provision known as the range access line item that would require the Bureau of Land Management and the Forest Service to develop a minimum of one public shooting range in each of their districts. So this can be, it can range from a clays range, it can range from a pistol handgun range to sight in your deer rifle, or go break a couple clays getting ready for the upcoming upland season. But at a time when the urban wildland interface continues to grow, we're seeing public lands closed to recreational shooting. So it's critically important for us to offset that somewhere else in the form of dedicated shooting ranges. And then Jeff obviously mentioned the voluntary public access habitat incentive program, the walk-in hunting programs. One of the challenges with that program to date is that demand far exceeds supply. And so there are only about 1/3 of states that offer walk-in hunting programs funded
Yeah,
through this
yeah.
effort. So we are trying to triple that. So we have it across the board, and all states can become eligible for walk-in hunting programs.
So let's just parse that one just a little bit. I don't want to go too deep into the weeds, but so what do you plan to do to try and facilitate that?
So the first thing is money, right?
Yeah.
So right now the program is funded at $50 million a year. There is a strongly supported bipartisan effort floating around in Congress that we're spending a lot of time on that would increase that from $50 million to $150 million.
Wow.
And therefore allow these other states to receive some of this funds to work with their landowners on a willing basis to open their land up for walk-in hunting programs.
And would that be more, we pay them for that? They get a certain amount per acre or something like that, right?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
So we would have 3 times as much to offer up to who knows how many more landowners with that. Wow.
Correct. And the goal is to make sure here that every state has an opportunity to enter into this program. And it's not just limited to the third of states that currently have this.
Yeah.
And you look at some of the states that it might not be a state like Montana or Utah that are very public land heavy states. You're looking at states like Missouri, Texas, et cetera, that have large contingencies of private land, state like Texas, where it's 98, 99% privately held. How can we work with some of those private landowners to open up some of these ranches to sportsmen and women and recognize their contributions through and by giving them money for that?
Wow. Well, on the macro level, we're getting a lot of great insights here, and we've drilled down a couple of times to it. But Jeff, before we get too much closer to our close, there are things that we can do that are unique to our personality, unique to a specific issue or a specific place. And I advocate for those a lot. I wrote a lot of essays during this whole Senator Lee debacle about how some guy who's sitting in his living room in his socks can do something right then, right there, to affect an issue, whether it's national or local or somewhere in between. Do you have an arsenal, a quiver of those kind of suggestions for us, whether it's writing a letter to the editor if your town still has a newspaper? What about other things that at the grassroots level we might be able to do?
So, you've touched on probably the most important thing, and Taylor's mentioned it before, and I've said it. You got to be knowledgeable, and we have a ton of information on our website. So we would encourage you check in on it every once in a while. But all politics, there's an adage: all politics is local. The one thing that a politician needs every time that they're up for re-election is your vote. And so they want something from you. When you want something from them, it's time to be well knowledgeable to know what you're asking for, when the timing is right, and then to be able to go ahead and make the ask. It's great that Taylor and I work with elected officials from all 50 states. We both live in the state of Maryland. We don't cast a vote in Oregon. We don't cast a vote in Montana, wherever. And so we need you as sportsmen and women in your home state to be able to reach out, because your voice is more important than our voice when it comes to connecting with your elected officials. And that's both at the federal level and the state level, because a lot of the wildlife management decisions that affect us as sportsmen and women are actually made at the state level. And so being engaged, and you don't have to be the wonky people that we are on this stuff. We try to make this boil down. We try to make it so, hey, now's the time to weigh in. And that's where, again, we use our partners and all the other groups to try to get that out. But sitting around and doing nothing and hoping for a good outcome is pretty Pollyannish, and you're going to get disappointed, and help us to help all of us as sportsmen and women by making your voice heard. And you do a tremendous job, and kudos to you, my friend, for always being out there and weighing in and letting people know what's going on and encouraging them and taking the leadership that you do to inform people and let them know that these things are out there, because it's a guaranteed. There's never going to be a period in the future where we're going to be able to sit back and just say nothing is going to happen out there, because it's fluid, it's in motion, and it is always going to be there.
Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate the compliment. I want to touch on something. I first saw it attributed to Woody Allen, and then I saw it attributed to Bob Dylan. Government is run by the people who show up. And showing up has a lot of different meanings, especially at the local level. Taylor, you've been there and done that. For all I know, you've been testifying at some county commission meeting somewhere. I know I have. What are some of those other almost guerrilla tactics that some of us are comfortable enough to do that you've seen used effectively?
To Jeff's point, all politics are local, and you have to get your voice out there, whether it's as simple as writing a letter to your United States Senator or your member of Congress, but also showing that this matters back in the state to them, right? And members of Congress often have town halls, and these are opportunities for them to hear directly from their constituents. And I'll give you a real life example of this, Scott. During the public lands fight, I called a Senate office just to make sure that they were on the right team on this issue. And I called them and I said, hey, I want to talk to you about the public lands issue. And they immediately responded, we know, we've been hearing more about this issue than any issue that we've ever heard about. We've been hearing about it in town halls, our emails, our phone calls are blowing up. So this stuff really matters. But members of Congress and senators need to see that their decisions here in DC, but also state legislators, are impacting real people and people in their districts that go to the same churches, the same schools, the same grocery stores as they do.
Those are all great ideas, and it's absolutely true. And it's great to hear that it really does work sometimes. I think about all the ways we can communicate now. I got an ask today. Here's the script. Fill in the blank. Call this number, and it'll be just as good as something else. And it's probably not quite as good as a heartfelt original idea, but it's better than nothing, isn't it?
Yes.
It's better than nothing.
Yeah, and again, we literally, in that public lands thing, I remember a senior senator's staffer calling me and saying, "Call the dogs off," and we're gonna vote there. And I said, "We're not calling the dogs off until this thing is dead, and you're gonna hear about it. And if you think you're gonna bring it up again in some midnight, behind the scenes stuff, we're awake. We're here 2 blocks away, paying attention at midnight, and the dogs are all they are right now is just at heel right now. We'll send them if we have to. Again, be sure of that."
I love it. Before we close, I just want to I am going into the weeds now, but it's critical, and I think you, Jeff, alluded to it earlier. The bill, whatever the bill is, it becomes law, but then the dirty work starts. Because once that law is law, we all look at it, and that's not what happens. Taylor, you want to touch on that? Don't go too deep. I didn't bring a weed eater with me.
I won't go too deep. So bill becomes law, president signs it. Then from there, it goes to the respective federal departments and agencies, and they're tasked with implementing this thing. And they rely on their in-house experts, but they also rely on external experts. And in many cases, we write legislation to actually require the federal agencies to leverage us from the private sector, because our federal agency partners are tasked to do a lot of different things, whether it's forest management, whether it's visitation, what have you, but we're the experts on this stuff. So from there, we start really rolling up our sleeves and saying, okay, how are we going to implement this? And sometimes it can go as quickly as 3 to 4 months. In many cases, it takes 3 to 4 years to implement a piece of legislation because there's a lot of components to this, and it's a very, very wonky issue to work through. But that's, again, why we're here in DC and why we focus solely on policy issues.
And the party happens the night that the bill is signed, but then the real work begins. Loosely, am I safe? I'm calling that the rule-making process. Am I right on that?
Yeah. The law is only, as he said, is halfway,
Yeah.
and then doing the back half. And that's why, again, we partner with all these critter groups, sort of the lack of a better word, but membership groups that are the true beneficiaries, whether it's Farm Bill conservation programs or habitat programs that are actually working as partners with the departments and the agencies to implement these things, because they're the ones that are then we kind of hand this off a little bit, and those are the types of groups that are really, really key to the success or failure of actually having these laws implemented in a way that benefits all of us as hunters, anglers, shooters,
Yeah, good. Thanks for the insights. Guys, this has been spectacular. Jeff, we got to do these a little bit more frequently than every 20 years.
I think so, Scott, I'm here. I'm here.
Yeah, but this is the way I prefer it. I do not go to Washington, D.C. anymore. The last time I was there, I got kicked off an airplane.
We're here. We're here for you. That's our job.
Well, I thank you both. Taylor Schmitz, and Jeff Crane of the Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation. Insights galore, motivation on top of everything else. Guys, here's to a great 2026 with some legislative victories and all sorts of policy wins for you, which means wins for us. Thanks for being a part of this insider edition of the Upland Nation podcast.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Scott. Happy New Year.
And the rest of you, don't go away as we bid a fond farewell to these guys. I've got just a little bit more to talk to you about, and it's mainly just to thank you first off for listening or viewing this podcast. If you're so inclined, now is the time to start staying on top of this stuff. First place to do it, congressionalsportsman.org. Follow all your critter groups at the local level, the state level, and the national level. Stay in touch with them. Hey, if you want to do something else about conservation, join another group. That money will be money well spent. All right, enough editorializing. This is only made possible because of our sponsors. If you will please patronize them and tell them I sent you. Cable Gang's Stakeout Systems, Heartland Lodge, Mid-Valley Clays and Shooting School, Trulock Choke Tubes, Purina Pro Plan Sport Dog Food, Sage and Breaker Gun Care Products, and Pointer Shotguns. Those folks are supporting you and these efforts at every level. Why don't you support them as well? And if you want to support me, just tell one more person about the Upland Nation podcast. That'll do it. I appreciate your feedback and your participation. Thanks so much. Have a great off season. I'll see you at the range.